Hurricane Irma is bearing down on Florida right now. We will have live coverage of that on Sunday morning, early in the morning. Myself and Alex Jones and the other great crew here. And just real quick, the whole Jennifer Lawrence video that Paul Joseph Watson just shot, here's what you need to take away from this, folks. Hollywood is not about ratings. Look at what's going on in movie theaters. They can't even sell a ticket. Why? Because America can't stand them anymore. Yet Jennifer Lawrence still goes on TV and does this interview. You know why? Because it's not about ratings, folks. It's about roles. Jennifer Lawrence knows if she goes on TV and bashes Trump and bashes America, she'll get the next role no matter what her movie does in the box office. That is how Hollywood works. Now, let's introduce to you Austin Petersen. Austin Petersen is going to be running against Claire McCaskill, one of the most detestable members of our government, a sexist at that. She says that men just need to shut up. And it was nice that somebody introduced me to Austin. I found him on Twitter, and then I found out he was running against Claire McCaskill, and I had to get him on. Austin, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Owen. Thank you for having me.
Well, Austin, I've got a series of stories here, including one from the Washington Examiner, why I became a Republican. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I had been a member of the Libertarian Party for a number of years. I cut my teeth politically, originally on a Republican campaign, though, started as a volunteer for Congressman Ron Paul. And then when I saw how the Republican Party treated him at the time, I was upset. So I worked with the Libertarians for quite some time until the beginning of this year. I actually spent 2 months making around 4,000 phone calls to my supporters. And 98% or more, including registered Libertarians, Republicans, and even a few Democrats, said that they wanted to beat Claire McCaskill. They said, run as a Republican. Don't change your principles. Just run as a Republican, because they want to beat Claire as bad as I do. And they, frankly, they think people like Rand Paul, Mike Lee, and Ted Cruz need some support up there. So that's why I'm running. I want to go help out the true constitutional conservatives in our government. Yeah, and people don't understand this notion where the Republican Party is kind of becoming such a diverse party of libertarians, true liberals, people that like states' rights, even the classic conservatives, the classic Republicans. It's kind of become this dynamic melting pot, and the left really doesn't know what to respond with because they're the ones losing voters. Another story that you had sent to my crew that you wanted to cover, and I think this is the kind of campaign that you're planning on running, a story from the Hill. It's time to restore federalism and make our founding fathers proud. Republicans and Democrats have forgotten one of the most basic principles of our government, namely the principle of federalism, which reserves all powers not given to the federal government in the Constitution to the states and the people. Actually, my home state of Missouri, where you're running against Claire McCaskill, is one of the most strong constitutional states left in the Union. Oh, yeah. And actually, in Missouri, a couple of years ago, one of our state legislators introduced a bill that would nullify federal gun laws in the state. So talk about independence right there. I mean, and that's the kind of resistance to tyranny that I like to see. So I think that the concept of decentralization can thrive here in Missouri, where people don't feel like they need an overarching, overweening federal government to tell them what to do or how thick the shoe leather should be in their shoes, what they can or can't do with their bodies. I think that this could be a good fertile territory for the kind of ideas that you and I support. Limited government, cutting spending, cutting taxes, overturning Obamacare, getting the government out of our lives from top to bottom.
And that's the populist thing right now. That's what I think most voters want, especially in what they call flyover country, my home country of Missouri, where you're going to be running. What's the response been? I mean, Claire McCaskill, that is a long-time swamp creature. This is a woman who's been in government for a long time. You know that she's going to be defending that position like a rabid cat. What have you seen so far from them?
Pretty funny. She's turned into something of a Trump supporter. It's kind of, well, you know, she's been going out saying how she wants to work with the president, and because Trump won this state by 19 points. But the truth is, we all know that she was Hillary Clinton's best friend. She was the first person on Capitol Hill to endorse Hillary Clinton for president way back in 2013. Missourians aren't falling for it. That's why Trump won by such a large margin here, is because Hillary was so unpopular, and she's tied to Hillary. She worked to pass the Affordable Care Act. She tries to kind of paint herself as a moderate, but when you look at her votes, she is a straight party line voting Democrat. She's part of the swamp, and you know, I'm coming to drain the swamp.
You know, in past elections, namesake has been perhaps the biggest advantage to these people, where people will go to the polls and they'll just see a recognizable name and they'll vote for it. This is a lot of times why sons or daughters will run, because they have the same name, they have that political prowess. But, you know, it seems to me that we might be seeing a new trend where people are going to go to the polls and they're going to be like, McCaskill again? I'll take the other candidate.
People tend to like outsiders. Now, it's funny that you say that, because in the last election, Trump may have won by 19 points, but on the same ballot, the Republican Senate candidate Roy Blunt only won by 3. If Trump hadn't been so strong, perhaps we wouldn't have had the junior senator from Missouri that we have right now. The people tend to be very anti-establishment out here. They don't like being told what to do. My potential primary opponent, current Attorney General of Missouri, Mitch McConnell guy, is looking at jumping into this race. And Missouri voters are not happy, because 72% of Republicans said they want somebody to challenge that guy, and 45% don't even want him to run. So that just goes to show that anybody who's tainted by the swamp, anybody who's touched by McConnell and Paul Ryan and all those guys, they're going to have a big uphill battle. And quite frankly, you know, I'm running because I believe in something. I believe in liberty. I was inspired by Ron Paul. You know, I care deeply about the philosophy of the founding fathers that this country was built upon. And I'm doing this because I think this is what's best for the citizens of Missouri, not because I'm in some donor's pocket. I've got no strings attached. McCaskill and my primary opponents, they are all bought and sold. They are owned, and they are going to have to do the bidding of their masters. And I don't have to. I want to be the next Ron Paul. I want to go and vote no, and have the courage to say, hey, no, it's time for us to turn this ship of state around. It's time for limited government. It's time for the Republicans to do what they campaigned on. It's time to repeal Obamacare. So that's why I'm doing this.
Repeal Obamacare, tax reform, these are two things that I know are going to be near and dear to your campaign, especially when you get into office. It's amazing to me, again, you just mentioned the Republicans. You know, for 8 years, they said we can repeal. We just need Congress. We just need the White House. We gave that to them. They do nothing. For, you know, since DACA got passed, they said DACA is unconstitutional, can't have DACA. Now all of a sudden they love it. I mean, what is the deal with these Republicans that are going against Trump?
They're spineless, many of them, and many of them are compromised by their donors. Frequently, they receive millions and millions of dollars from PACs, and they have super PACs that have special interests. And these special interests, they want something. They want tit for tat. They want quid pro quo. Just wait. When you see the fundraising numbers on the upcoming fall FEC reports, you'll know that a lot of these people have conflicts of interest. There's a lot of pay for play that goes on, and big corporations that don't like capitalism because they don't like competition are going to come in there and fund the candidates that they think are going to give them the best benefit they can. You know, when Donald Trump talks about us getting screwed by foreign trade, it's because of things like the EXIM Bank. Consider this. When you get big government Democrats like Elizabeth Warren coming out and defending things like the Export-Import Bank, you know that we've got captured, that our government has been captured, because when the left says that they're for the little guy but goes out and supports crony capitalism or corporatism at its worst, that's when you know our government has been bought and paid for. And quite frankly, you know, money is great. I believe in freedom and I believe in capitalism, but money really isn't my primary motivation for doing this. I like to consider myself a very fiery ideologue. I believe in principles. I believe in ideas. To me, this is a philosophical struggle, a battle for the commanding heights of the economy. And to me, the commanding heights of the economy should not be controlled by corporate oligarchs or masters or by anyone who has an individual interest in themselves, but I'm trying to do what's in the best interest of all Americans, defending individual liberty, and that's the best way to defend. You talk about the smallest minority on earth, right? That is the individual. And so I would like to see us do things like bring an end to the federal war on drugs. I would like to see us have criminal justice reform. Quite frankly, I think we need to get rid of most of these alphabet agencies, and that's what I'm bringing. That's my message when I'm campaigning for the U.S. Senate here in Missouri.
You gotta love that. Austin Petersen with us on the War Room. He's going to be with us for another segment. Don't go anywhere. We'll talk more about his campaign and how we're going to give rights back to the individual. Welcome back to the War Room. We got one more segment with Austin Petersen. He's running for Senate against Claire McCaskill in the state of Missouri. But in the final two segments of the show, we're going to go back to the phone lines, and we're going to see if any of these spineless liberals who want to insult me on social media are willing to call in and have an actual debate with me. 888-201-2244, 888-201-2244. 888-2244, specifically for liberals who want to try to debate me. We want to hear from you. Prove you're not a coward. Call into the show and debate me. Now, let's go back to Austin Petersen. Austin, I got this story here. I guess it was written by you. Fixing human trafficking by fighting for freedom. You get into the terrible thing that goes on in this country all the time, never gets reported on, and that's the human trafficking. Tell me why this is such a big issue to you.
Well, it's a big issue because we're essentially victimizing women twice, once by the pimps and twice by the government. Because of the way that we legislate morality in such a way, we've got a sort of Baptist and bootleggers approach here. The human traffickers, they definitely want this practice to continue to remain on a black market. It's kind of like the war on drugs, right? Where we declared a war on drugs, we got more drugs. We declared a war on poverty, we got more poverty. Maybe we should declare war on jobs, Owen. Maybe we'd get more jobs. The truth is that there's a counterintuitive approach to how you solve problems, and the markets actually can solve this because the way that women are being abused in the human trafficking system is such that, one, they get forced into these careers, many of them, not all of them, but many of them, and when they're forced into these careers, they can also be arrested. Many times women are lured here from other countries, and then they're forced onto the street, and because of the laws the way that they are, the women are then prosecuted. They get picked up, and they can be prosecuted for something that they had no part in, which is why I've called for decriminalizing the issue of prostitution. Now I realize that may not be a politically popular idea, but Owen, what's right isn't always what's popular, and what's popular isn't always what's right. Frankly, I think that it's time for us to call an end to persecuting women for making decisions for what they do with their bodies on this issue, and that's really what it is. People who use force and coercion to force people into these kinds of lifestyles should absolutely be prosecuted. But one of the ways that we can solve this problem on the back end is we can decriminalize prostitution and say, hey, no longer are we going to throw women in jail because they have been pimped out, because they have been victims. We're not going to victimize them twice.
You know, that's an interesting thought process. It's one that actually my mind has gone down before. I've never understood how you have this huge industry, the pornography industry, which is huge. It's massive. You have individuals that can just go on the internet and, you know, basically do whatever they want for money, but prostitution is somehow illegal. It always seemed like a double standard to me. And I think the overarching issue that you're talking about here is control. See, when the federal government is in control of the drug war, well, guess what? They're in control of the drugs. And we found it many times the CIA is the one running the drugs. The same thing with human trafficking and groups like the UN. So I think what you're saying is get the power away from these corrupt establishments that are just using these problems to enrich themselves.
Yeah, it's the progressive mindset at work in everything. It's infected both parties. The progressive ideology is one that says that everything that I like should be subsidized and everything I don't like should be banned. And that's the problem that we have nowadays. I mean, from name any issue, the war on drugs, gay marriage, everything, it's that everybody wants to force their lifestyle choices on everyone else. And I had a conversation with Ben Shapiro the other day who said that conservatives and libertarians really need to get together, and conservatives need to accept the libertarian view on government, and libertarians need to accept the conservative view on social institutions. The idea that families, friends, neighbors, and churches are meant to solve the problems, that in order for us to have a social fabric for society to succeed and thrive, we don't need coercion, we don't need force, we don't need big government. We need churches, we need nonprofits, Rotary groups, right, Lions clubs to step in and do the work, because if we don't have a social fabric where social institutions solve many of these problems, then we will descend into leftism, we will descend into big government, we will descend into progressivism, where people will rely on government to solve the problems. And it's a great way for people to avoid responsibility, to say that someone else is going to solve the problem for them because they don't do it. But that's why society is being torn apart. It's because we have no responsibility to one another. We have no personal responsibility either. And that's why you see these leftists on college campus, these snowflakes and Antifa going out and causing violence, because they've never had to be responsible for anything. They've never created a job, and they've never held a job. And so they go out and they're being repressed on college campuses, so they can't engage in free speech, and so they descend into violence. And that's why society is ripping it apart at the seams, is because we've all determined that government should solve many of these problems. I say get out of it. I believe in liberty. Let's let social institutions thrive. Again, families, friends, neighbors, churches, to solve the biggest problems of our day. And the bigger the problem, the more localized should be the solution.
You know, and I think the state of Missouri is really going to resonate with your message. I mean, the state of Missouri, for the most part, is very individual-minded. It's not really hard left or right. Honestly, it's more centrist, more individual. The only area I can think of where people might not like your message is Columbia, where the University of Missouri is, just a bastion of liberal indoctrination. They tried to enslave me into the liberal indoctrination when I was there for 2 years. But I would imagine that you're probably getting a lot of good response in the state of Missouri. I mean, again, if you look at St. Louis, okay, maybe they usually vote blue, but overall, that's a pretty much conservative area. Same with Kansas City. Even Jefferson City, the capital, these are conservative people. I think your message is going to work.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, Owen. I was a little nervous when I was going to St. Louis because I'm from the Kansas City side of things. You know how the Cardinals-Royals rivalry is, right? But
oh, sure.
So I showed up in St. Louis at a GOP picnic, and you know, there's some potential competitors out there, and I thought maybe they'd give me the cold shoulder. When I showed up, there were an army of people wearing our shirts, passing out literature, walking around. I mean, Ron Paul actually did really well in the Missouri caucuses, and so there are a lot of liberty Republicans out here, and they have been looking for someone who preaches that same message of foreign policy, non-interventionism, of limited government, cutting spending, cutting taxes. They like that. And Missourians have actually been treating me very well. I mean, I am a Missourian, right? I'm not a carpetbagger. Born and raised here, went to college in Springfield. And so I think that I can connect with these people. But, very soon the bad guys are coming. And that's not just McCaskill, right? The Republicans, McConnell, and all those guys, they are gathering forces to throw someone into this race against me. They'll have millions and millions of dollars, and I'll have nothing but the grassroots to establish myself on. But it's not the candidate with the most money that always wins, although we could always use donations. But it's the candidate who can connect with voters. So I'm going to go out there and talk with the farmers, talk with them about these issues. I'm going to go to the cities. I got no problem going to places like Ferguson and talking about things like criminal justice reform and how that could stop some of the tension between the inner cities citizens and the police. And I think that I can beat Claire McCaskill. I think I can remove her. Let's replace a progressive Democrat with a very libertarian Republican.
Well, yeah, Missourians for the most part are just kind of like, leave me alone, let me do my thing, don't get involved in my business, just go about your day. And I think that now politically there's this new charge because of the attacks they're seeing on their way of life, the attacks they're seeing on Trump. Final 20 seconds, Austin Petersen.
Yeah, so the big thing right now is that we have to get people awake. Like I'm a bit of an unknown, right? So an underdog. So I hope that people will visit my website, austinpetersen.com. Take a look at my background. I was a television producer for Judge Napolitano, big Ron Paul guy, was a Tea Party.
There he is, folks. Austin Petersen. Follow him on Twitter. Get this guy elected.